Hello, good morning, and welcome to Sunrise this beautiful Saturday morning. I'm Ayo Makine. Today is the 19th day in the month of July 2025. And let me begin with a commiseration. This is the first episode of this program I recall having since the passing of President Muhammadu Buhari. And of course, a number of things have also since happened. As a result of that one, as soon as no sooner had his death been announced, that we also heard of the passing of the Awujale of Ijebuland of Babatunde, and a whole load of things have happened also as a result of that. Well, and both issues of the two gentlemen have come with some kind of flashbacks or clapbacks from people. On the one hand, the death of late President Buhari raised issues, as far as some people are concerned, about the fact that, look, why did he have to be, in a hospital outside the shores of Nigeria? And of course, that issue isn't happening for the first time. Even while he served as president and Vice President Osinbajo stood in for him for a while, issues also were because, hey, why did the president have to spend so long a time outside of Nigeria? And why not in Nigeria and all of those things? Legislation and all of those things. Policies should be brought up so that Nigeria's leaders don't go out of the country. Everything has to be here. We have to be patriotic, blah, blah, blah. That's on the one hand. And that conversation is still continuing. Despite every explanation, people are still asking questions about that one. And now on the other side, after the passing of Babatunde, we also heard some people saying, hey, the process of his burial is having issues. We can't jettison cultural beliefs, traditions, and all those things. All those conversations are still there. And it just begs the question, of our commitment to who we are and what we believe. So our commiserations to the two families and to the president and the passing of President Buhari, and to the governor of Ogun State and the passing of the late Awujale of Ijebuland. And talking about traditional rulers, I'm sure some of you must have seen that video making the rounds about an Ezendigbo in Ghana, and the reactions of the people of Ghana about that one. And I'm like, hey, maybe because we haven't communicated it well, for whatever reason, is Ndigbo here, is Ndigbo there. I think that has also drawn the attention of the monarchs, the leadership of the Southeast traditional leaders, who have come out to say, look, we shouldn't be having Ndigbo outside of Igbo land, because it comes with some cultural, traditional parlances and all those things. And so rather than have Ndigbo in diaspora that is outside Igbo land, we should be having Onyendu Ndigbo. I hope I got it right, But it'll be good to know what you think about that position of the Southeast traditional leaders, when they came up with that decision and that position. And in fact, the statement they put out, according to CKN, is, guys, this thing must happen immediately. It is with immediate effect. So change everything from Ezendigbo to Onyendu Ndigbo, wherever you are, especially so long as you are not within the shores of Igbo land. So the question is, do you think that sufficiently appeals to the issues raised by the Ghanaian young people? And do you think it'll put paid to all of the issues around all of those things that people have been saying, particularly about that one? Because it's a thing of pride to protect your cultures and values in the different parts of the world. But then when some people are feeling uncomfortable with it, that's one thing. On the other hand, is whether or not it denigrates culture and tradition. That's another conversation altogether. Now, there's this other one, and that's something actually happened around Ogun State as well. And it's a call, particularly to the federal government, maybe more importantly to the state government, the Ogun State government, because it is right within the domains of Ogun State. You want to look at this bridge. It's called Lotto Bridge. Look at it. It's been abandoned for a very, very long time. And it starts from nowhere and ends nowhere. It's just right across the expressway, the third mainland bridge. And I'm wondering, where is this going? Where is it coming from? No matter how ingenious the idea was, guess what? This bridge is already failing. Look at it. There are some videos that are making the rounds of vehicles, of heavy artillery vehicle, heavy equipment vehicle, breaking these. And look at that. It's an accident waiting to happen, and it will practically shut down the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. God forbid that that happens. And it's right in the middle of the expressway. It's not coming from anywhere. It's not going from anywhere. So the questions abound as to who is giving attention to this, and where and when does this end? This is a classic example of an abandoned bridge, abandoned project. And we hear that there are more than 50,000 of them, according to the Chartered Institute of Project Managers in Nigeria. So, dear federal government, dear Mr. Minister of Works, this is definitely something for your attention. If, no matter how ingenious the idea was, maybe it was started by one government and it wasn't sustained by another, well, this is what we have. Another accident waiting to happen. Dear federal government, dear state government, a call to your attention, please. This is a call for you to please see what needs to be done in fact, immediate, or let me use the language of Chief Zebudagba Okorigwe. Look at this, look at this, look at this. They are not broken by people. It's vehicles passing under this bridge that pull these things onto where it is. And who knows when the next vehicle is going to drive under this bridge and pull it down. As Chief Zebudaya will say, to be forewarning is to be forearming. Thank you very much. And lastly, the tax laws have been signed into law, and the tax bills have been signed into law as passed by the National Assembly, and they will take effect in January. I listened to some clips of what Mr. Taiwo Oyedele said about it, and there's a lot that so many people still don't know about it. But what Mr. Oyedele was saying essentially is, from January 2026, prices will drop. As in, prices of goods and services will drop. The unvatted ones, those ones that have zero VAT, their prices will drop. I said amen, and I heard it again. You know why I said amen? And some people will say this is Nigeria. Oh, yes. But guess what? These are Nigerians. So, of course, one of the arguments he put up was, okay, if we have removed VAT from bread and maybe other things like that, and I'm a bread producer, I used vatted equipment, vatted products to produce unvatted bread. So how does this work? I guess we're going to have to wait to see that. But it's the enforcement that I'm actually concerned about. We can enforce organized private sector. We can enforce government institutions. How do we enforce small and medium enterprises? Is it something that Nigerians have to do themselves? It's what I'm just waiting for. So while we have about, well, less than 6 months before the full implementation of the law begins, or of all these laws begin, question then would be, how will the enforcement be? And we also hear that there's going to be a tax bureau, for appeals and all those things. Will they be all over the states, all over all the states of the Federation? So many questions, particularly about the implementation, to answer. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a bloody presenter. So this morning, we have a number of things that we would like to bring to your attention. The first conversation this morning is this right now on your screen. We have a one-on-one with Mr. Babatunde Fashola. Going to be having a beautiful conversation with him about the state of the nation. And then visionary leaders are needed in the country. What are, in your own opinion, the requirements of a visionary leader? Is it time for us to be discussing this is actually in the light of, hey, defections here and there, coalitions here and there, all towards 2027. Will it solve the problem of Nigeria before 2037? Part of the conversations to have this morning. And lifestyle this morning, we'll be talking about how you can enjoy wholeness, how you can move from striving to thriving. Yeah, I know it sounds like a rhyme, y'all. Well, that's part of our conversation this morning on lifestyle, and hopefully we'll have an artist of the week as well join us this morning. So do me a favor, wherever you are, right now, grab your cup of cocoa, if it's cocoa you prefer, and I'll be right back with you. Thank you so much for staying with us this Saturday morning. So it's a weekend, and many of us are easing into the day. Some are probably still in bed. Yes, I see you. Breakfast in bed, good idea. But let's have a straight talk and some sober reflection and hopefully some insight with our guest this morning. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria, a two-time governor of Lagos State, widely regarded for driving bold infrastructural reforms. He also served 8 years at the federal level as Minister of Power, Works and Housing, and then as Minister of Works and Housing, overseeing some of the most ambitious national projects in recent history. Please help me welcome, as you can see on the screen here, Mr. Babatunde Fashola, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Ayo.
The first question I want to ask you is about your. But first of all, thank you so much for making out the time. It's about the statement you put out in the wake of the passing of President Buhari. You said some quite lofty things about him, and a number of people who have also worked with him have one thing or the other to say. I don't know if you can tell us whether or not you think we as Nigerians have quite come to terms with the reality of the fact that we lost someone so prestigious and so valuable.
Well, first of all, again, condolences to the country, to his family, and his close associates, as I also express condolences to the Oloris and the children of the Awujale of Ijebuland and to the government and people of Ogun State. All of this came together. I was on my way out of the country at the time. I got the notice of President Buhari's translation, and then, of course, much later in the day, Awujale's news broke. And what just occurred to me was perhaps more than a coincidence, that two very good friends decided to end their journeys amongst us on the same day. But back to Buhari, I think clearly a much misunderstood man. As I said in parts of that tribute, the efforts in his first coming to branded as war against indiscipline. Maybe it could have been branded differently, but his underlying ethos was to ensure that we lived as an orderly and law-abiding people. And that is a big plus for any nation. If you go to any country and you come away with the impression that, oh, these people are law-abiding, they're orderly, it's almost a place you want to go back to, it's a place you want to invest in. So, but again, those were some of the things that we didn't understand about him. I was making notes for a later contribution by way of a second book. And I had reserved a chapter that I called Buhari Laughs, Buhari eats. He loved his food, and there were many parts of him that were much misunderstood. And I thought that those parts of him should have come out, but sadly there will be extensions of that as we go on. On the political scene, of course, there is a vacuum that has to now be filled, and what it takes to fill that vacuum may not be easy to do in a short time. The nearest that one can reach back to another Buhari was Aminu Kanu. And after Aminu Kanu, there was no leader like that for a long time. And you can see the time it took for Buhari's leadership, his connection with the ordinary people to emerge. It took decades for that to happen. So whoever aspires to fill those shoes must understand the nature and the quantum of the journey they are undertaking.
Um, it's quite a time that we're in, Mr. Fashola.
Well,
It's
very
quite,
challenging and
yes.
interesting times.
Yes, I wanted to just bring up another perspective to that, because you talked about his politics and in the political sphere. I see that a good number of people across political divides, across party lines, you know, pay tribute to the family. You know, they honored him in death as well. And one of the questions, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, that people have started asking is what will happen to his political family? I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think in his lifetime, we've already seen some movements and some reaffirmings as well. As people are moving, there were reaffirmings that this is where we are. And I recall a guest on your program, I think it was Farouk Aliu, who said that, look, listen, as far as this is concerned, the last word by the leader, President Buhari, was that he was staying in APC and he did not consider it just an advisory. He considered it an order. So we will wait and see.
All right. Well, still talking about his legacy. What are, in your opinion, would you consider his leadership and legacy that Nigerians must never forget? For instance, you have talked about the fact that he was misunderstood. But then there are those who would look at some of the impact of of the government and the one that he headed. And we'll look at the fact that on the one hand, as you said, he's a good man. He was visionary and all, the best way he could. But then he also led some people who may not be as supportive of his visionary direction as he himself was.
Well, I can't readily now say that there was one person in his government who was not supportive of his vision and direction at the time. And I think that people must have the courage of their convictions to say what they think. Not a few of us disagreed with some policies initiated not by Buhari, by ministers, departments, and agencies of government, and they came to council. And in that place, we spoke freely. Minutes were taken. But the fact that you disagree or I disagree did not necessarily mean that we disagreed with the government. We probably disagreed with the specific policy. And the principle is collective responsibility. If the majority vote that policy must pass, you become bound by it, irrespective of the views that you take. So even at sub-national level, as a member of Governor Tinubu's, then Governor Tinubu's cabinet, I disagreed with some things, just as others did. It didn't mean that my disagreement or that of others carried the day. In some instances, it shaped the way conclusions were reached. But essentially, this was a team bound by the vision of one man, and we did heavy lifting that we could. As you pointed out in your intro about my appearance, there were some really life-defining uh, projects and undertakings that happened, and every government to its season. And as the popular word is, this is a continuum. It's a continuing journey of rebuilding Nigeria in phases and via administrations.
One of those instances, Mr. Fashola, is the borrowing, or rather the ways and means of the CBN governor at the time, which led to some printing of money in tens of trillions of naira, creating what economists consider a false hope, of an illusion of what our economy stood at, and that it is this present government that is bringing, the real issues, our way. We had a false exchange rate at the time, false look at the exchange rate. For instance, during the Buhari government, we understand it was something in the region of 400 or 500 naira to the dollar, but now the reality, according to this government, is it's actually a lot more than that, which has also been espoused by Mr. Oyedele. So some believe that as a leader, the government of the day, even in the executive council that you cited, must have been able to come out and say, guys, no, we are deceiving Nigerians. Can we give them the reality?
Now, I don't recall one meeting of the executive council in which the ways and means borrowing was presented to council. I don't recall it ever came to us. Perhaps it might have gone to the National Economic Council, but I am not aware of that. And again, there are committees in which some of us served and committees in which others didn't serve. So it never came, a Ways and Means report never came to the Federal Executive Council. And I stand to be contradicted on that. And I attended as many council meetings that I could, except when I was out of Abuja and some other official assignment. That said, let us also remember that at some point in the past, in the history of this country, the central bank used to be like a department of the Ministry of Finance. It was in the era of reforms of the 80s, late 80s into 90s, that the central bank became an autonomous organ of government responsible solely for monetary policy. And the idea was to bring it in conformity with global best practices where the executive, the sovereign, doesn't interfere with the control of monetary policy. So Buhari didn't create that either. That was law. And so there were certain things that the central bank did through its board, and it had impact, of course, on the nation. There was opportunity for oversight, for example, by the National Assembly. So some of the questions I asked myself when all this was going on, where was the parliament in terms of reining in, because they made the law. So there are things that the executive could do, there are things that parliament could do, there were things that they both could do. And my understanding, and so I remember at the time when currency was being changed, that was when I realized that looking at the law, there was a requirement for the government to approve, for the president to approve, and that led to what then happened at the time. But back to the subject of Ways and Means, the other point to make was that it was in a season, and I think if you decompose the entire borrowing, and I'm not making any factual thing here because I don't have the records, but I recall that in that season of post-COVID recovery, very few, if any, of the countries of the world didn't undertake some form of Ways and Means to reflate their economies. Now, whether we went over the top or not are matters that I believe are still, I don't have the documentation and the records to speak to those matters with any authority.
Well, still on CBN, but this time the governor specifically, one of the criticisms of the late President Buhari's government was that he could have reined in the CBN governor at the time, to the effect that even in the build-up to the 2023 elections, there were campaign posters, there were vehicles and all those things saying that the CBN governor wanted to contest for president, and there were insignia to show. There was never a rebuttal. Even the CBN governor never really confirmed nor rebutted it. So, and there are those who are wondering, the president could have said, look, guy, you can't be in government and still be doing this? Or do you think that's also something for the National Assembly?
I express no opinion on that matter. I think that the long-term effect of it have become manifest in what is going on, and the investigations and trials being undertaken. I express no opinion on the matter at all.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Fashola. So, we're still talking politics, and this time one of the reasons that I actually asked about the political family of President Buhari, or late President Buhari. Is this conversation around coalition coming up here and there, opposition coalition coming up? There's a fresh push to unite opposition voices. And we've seen some people who in the old CPC, decamping from the APC and joining some other political forces here and there. And even some other, those other political forces have teamed up into the ADC. So the question a number of people are asking is, should the APC be concerned, or is this deja vu from 2014?
Well, there are many things to take away from those developments. I think perhaps the first is that it puts a lie, a big lie, to the story making the rounds about 8 weeks ago that Nigeria was going to become a one-party state. So it puts a lie to that. Because there is an opposition of some quality, whatever that quality may be. The second point to make is that it is a manifestation of a right to choose, a freedom of choice, a freedom to associate, and one must respect that, as I do. In terms of the political consequences, there are many things waiting that I am waiting to see. Gathering ourselves together and saying we want to change Nigeria, we want to remake Nigeria, is all very well and good. What is the compelling alternative message? So that without a manifesto, without a program of action, I can't speak to how persuasive the coalition will be. But there's still a distance to run. So those are my initial thoughts. I respect and the rights to associate, and Nigeria perhaps benefits from the reawakening of opposition from what has been a long slumber, if you ask me. The opposition essentially abdicated their responsibility over the last 2 years, at the very least.
Mr. Fashola, that should give some people concern. And I know it will be giving you concerns, even if you can't really openly express it, because as a Democrat and as someone who has always championed constitutional alignment and all of that, the reasons, what reason do you think we can give to the fact that the opposition went into a slumber, excuse me, since the APC came into government?
I think the only people who can answer that question are those in opposition. There's this book, I think, by Nigel Fletcher. It's called something Opposition Politics, Life in the Shadows. So I got a copy when we were in opposition, and I read it, and I saw in more practical and experienced presentation of life in opposition in the United Kingdom government. Because I entered politics, I entered the opposition side of politics when I became Chief of Staff to the governor in 2002, and we endured that for all of 13 years at least. And it came at a cost. There were things we were denied officially and unofficially. There were inducements from the back, come and join us, and so many other things. And it went as high as presidents using the leverage of being in the majority to throttle and frustrate People will remember very, very famously and perhaps infamously the role that the federal government used FEMA to play in Lagos. And that was really making life difficult for us at the time. People will remember the seizure of local government monies, and people may not recall, it was six states that went to court. I think 5 of them were in the then PDP on local government creation. But they all jettisoned us, and it was only Lagos that pursued that case to the end. And there were so many other instances. So when I say that they went into a slumber, I mean, I haven't had a coordinated response, for example, to the 4 tax bills by any of the parties. And you can't be talking democracy without taxation. It's the heart and soul of democracy. What happens to the money bill, and how will monies be spent, who will pay more, who will pay less. And that for me was an abdication. We had, for example, the controversy in the very early life of Parliament about how much it costs to buy a car for legislators to do their work. Opposition was missing in taking sides with the people at the time. So, and everybody justified why they should have a car. So, and you then wondered, really? There is no differing opinion? And so on. And I recall somebody put out a message at one time and said, look, listen, they miss the APC opposition.
Oh dear.
The APC was formed.
Please go ahead.
Now, how that narrative became reality is another matter for debate. So, as I said, I'm waiting for their plan of action, and then one can comment in more detail and specificity. But I respect the right to associate.
But you don't think, excuse me, you don't think that the APC has anything to fear, because there are quite strong political forces that have come together. You know that in the 2023 election, you know the numbers that the PDP got, the articles PDP got. You know the numbers that the Labour Party's LP got in the 2023 elections. If we put them together, they are way more than that of President Tinubu today. So you don't think there's anything for the APC to fear?
I have not said that. I have said that I respect their choice to associate. I have said that I am waiting to see a plan of action. Nigerians are going to have a say in what happens post this thing. And you see, elections, I see elections as competitive sports. And in competitive sports, you must respect your opponent. And I have respected the opponent, the adversary. But fear is not a strategy to engage an opponent. And the thing is to say, okay, what is our A game and what is the opponent's A game? And we take it from there.
Well, still talking about defections, there have been a number of defections to the APC as well. Some governors have come into the APC, and a number of politicians are defecting to the APC. Do you think this is a healthy consolidation, or it's just mere survival politics?
Well, again, I am not in those states. Every politics is local, and whether it is one or the other, only those who make the decision are best suited to explain what it is. But the picture it certainly paints is a stronger APC. States that we have struggled to win before have come into our fold, and that will, of course, translate to redrawing the political map when election season comes up.
Well, Mr. Fashola, there are those who feel that, the defections into APC also signifies that these people coming from the various other political parties just freely and willy-nilly into the APC shows that there is no clear-cut identity for any political party in the country. And including the APC. There are those who also say that such defections will either enrich or dilute the APC's identity. What are your thoughts on that?
My first reaction is to re-quote myself, if that is something that is possible, that I consider political parties to be somewhat akin or metaphorically similar to houses of worship in the Abrahamic faiths, and that it is a house where you don't drive sinners from temples or churches or mosques, because it is a place of redemption, as it were, but you don't hand them the pulpit until they have fully repented. So it's a game of numbers. So every political party wants more people to come in. That's the first thing. I think the other point to make is that when we're looking for distinctions of ideas, we must first understand that the problems are the same, whether it is healthcare, whether it is more money in my pocket, whether it is access to employment, whether it is small business challenge, whether it is infrastructure for transport. The problems are the same. What really differs are the mechanics by which one party sees the problem as distinct from how the other party sees the problem, and what are the methodologies by which they propose to address them. But the problems don't change. The intensity, of course, multiplies or diminishes as we go along. That is why, for me, it will be interesting to hear what the alternative narrative will be. And then that is when we can have rigorous debate, really, if you tell me how you would do things differently. It's not in one hand during the last election to say, I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. You didn't win the election, your opponent won the election, and then you come back to say, I would have done it differently. How differently would you have done it? Give us detail. Then we will tell you that this is what will happen if you do this, and this is what will happen if you do that. And this is not the only place that people cross. So I did some research over the few. There are many prominent politicians across the Atlantic have also changed parties, not once, not a few times. I think Nigel Farage, who is now head of Reform, which is like probably a local parallel here, moving away from, was in UKIP, and I think at some time it was in another party. President Donald Trump used to be a fundraiser and member of the Democratic Party before he got converted like the biblical Saul, and he's now the standard bearer of the Republican Party. And there have been a few governors across there. I think famously one time the governor of Florida who crossed from the Republican Party. So there are movements, perhaps not at the same frequency as ours.
Well, let's go to some governance issues now. You spoke about all politics being local the other time, and you also referenced something around local governments. I've been personally very, very concerned about about local politics. I believe, and I have seen this having had a stint at one local government or the other in Lagos State, that the first line of defense for security in Nigeria, which has collapsed as a result of the failure of the local government system, is the local government administrations, because they have their own security councils and all. And you may want to speak to that as a former governor, because it was in Oyo, or I think Ojo local government that I served with a civil servant at the time, and I saw the way they usually put themselves together. Now, it's been more than a year since the Supreme Court ruled, reinforced the local government autonomy issue, pretty much emphasizing, according to the Supreme Court, what the Constitution says. Yet it seems that implementation remains frozen. In your opinion, what's blocking progress? What are they legal limitations, political resistance, or cultural factors? Or you think this whole idea is a farce?
Well, before I respond to that, let me just first go back to the point you made about something collapsing. So I think mindset and attitude and this mentality is always important. My mentality is always a positive one. So I don't see collapse in whatever sense you see. I see a need to improve, and therefore it's aspirational for me. The job never finishes. But in terms of local governments, really, I think that the debate we must have, debate we must have, is whether we really want autonomous local governments. It's a debate that must be had. As it stands today, it is unrealistic to expect autonomy for local governments created by the Constitution. They were not meant to be autonomous. That is my view after a very, very close reading of certain provisions of the Constitution. Some of those provisions provide, for example, that the local government uh, in its economic activities and all of that will have laws made for it by the State House of Assembly. If you look at the legal and ordinary meaning of the word autonomy, it suggests that you are acting independently without any outside influence and authority. And to that extent, a State House of Assembly making laws for what and how a local government can function is in itself an external influence that contradicts the idea of autonomy. The next thing, of course, is to look in the fourth schedule of the Constitution and look at all of the responsibilities that are assigned to local governments, such as the operation of slaughterhouses, abattoirs for animals, cemeteries, building of roads, advertising hoardings, primary schools, primary healthcare centers. All of those responsibilities are dependent on one item, land. And to the extent that the state government controls land, uh, which affects how the local governments will carry out these functions, I didn't think that autonomy was intended. Now, if we now decide that we want autonomous local government, those are some of the things we have to free up if that is our decision. So we must have an agreement, but as it stands, I don't think that autonomy was intended. What I think was intended was some sort of collaboration, some sort of supervision, some sort of oversight of the state over the local government. And that is inherent in what you will find in Section 162, which deals with the state joint local government account. And there is history behind the enactment of that section, because up till 1999, the local governments used to collect their monies directly from the federation account under a process that I think was known as JAC, Joint Accounts and Allocation something. But in the advent of the democratic era, it was found out that there were so many of them, or not a few of them, who had defaulted in the very basic obligation of paying staff salaries, primary healthcare workers, primary school teachers, salaries and pensions, and there was a backlog of debt. And I met some of that debt when I became governor, and we were working then. And I think that is partly the history behind the creation of the state joint local government account, to ensure that there was some supervision. Whether the supervisors have now become as culpable as those they were supervising is another narrative entirely.
Well, so, and that's quite elucidating. So would you then support direct federal allocations to LGs? Maybe I should put it this way. How then does the Supreme Court ruling, in your opinion, differ or align with the Constitution and the things that you're saying?
Now, that's an interesting one. So I've read the judgment, all of the judgments. And the first point to note is that given the allegations and the reportage of what was going on in some local governments, there was no patriot who would say in good conscience that there was not the need for some action to be taken, as initiated by the learned Attorney General. There was no patriot who would say, oh, everything was fine. You can't say that. Something had to be done. But the question then is, the Supreme Court had the benefit of some of the history that I referred to in the arguments that are presented to them, and whether or not the Supreme Court then appropriately deployed the tools at its disposal to cure the remedy, to remedy the ailment that had been presented to them. And you will see from the legal commentaries post the judgment that a lot of people were of the view that, well, there was the need to act. But lawyers, senior lawyers, were divided about whether or not that judgment could stand constitutional scrutiny beyond that purpose, and whether it was just a policy judgment, which again, Supreme Court is a policy court. But when you look at the tools that they deployed, was how to interpret the word shall, and they said it was permissive, as they have done rightly in some other cases. You will see that in that court there was a dissent. One of the justices dissented on that interpretation and said, no, I don't agree with this, but I agree that we need to act. I agree that certain people shouldn't do certain things, but I don't agree with this interpretation. And so you will see even a divided court on a very narrow point of interpretation. But again, the kind of assistance they got from counsel and all the time they had to prepare with the backlog of cases that they have. But here we are, that is the judgment. That is the judgment, and we must live with it until, and as we continue to implement that judgment, we will see what one may call matters that will arise post the implementation, and we will go from there.
But do you think that is that's partly responsible for the delay in the execution?
Well, I don't have information, honestly. You see, I'm no longer, I'm like you now. You have more information than me. So I don't have first-line information about what's going on. So without facts, it's hard to form an opinion.
But it also makes it raises another question. The judiciary, and you operate in that space, have received not a few bashings from time to time, particularly because the law, I beg your pardon, the courts, federal, high courts, appeal courts, even the Supreme Court, will come up with judgments, rulings, and they will go unobeyed, and nobody is going to obey them for a long time. And then sometimes they will still come back to the same court to get another judgment on the same issue, and it will still go on without being obeyed, without them being complied with, without being enforced. So that's the challenge, the question that's coming up here, Mr. Fashola.
So I can't, you don't mention specifically now any one judgment that has not been obeyed.
Well, this LG ruling is one, for instance, sir.
But you are seeing that, we're seeing now that states are conducting elections, which was one of the issues there. You must be democratically elected to benefit from whatever. I don't know for a fact whether any state that has not conducted elections when they have fallen due has been paid. But I do know that one or two states have had supposedly their allocations either withheld or delayed or something like that, and it is affecting administration at the local level. As I said, the full implementation of the impact of the decision will take time to unfold, and then we will have a better picture of whether or not this was what was intended. For example, if you go into section 162 in detail, there are subsequent subsections there, and there are other sections, but I think the pivotal section was the one about states joins local government, and that they should distribute the monies to the state. They should allocate the money to the state, who then goes to distribute. There's a preceding subsection there, which says that each state shall open a state joint local government account. So the question to ask is that if the Supreme Court has said that the shall in that provision of, I think, 1625 is permissive, does it mean then that 1624, if that is the correct one, becomes permissive too, and states are relieved of the burden of opening that account, and they may or may not open it, even when their local governments are democratically elected. That is one impact. The other impact is that there is another mandatory account for the Judicial Service Commission, I think, and NJC. And there is also a mandatory word that certain accounts shall be open for fund. Has that also become permissive? Because it wasn't considered in this case. But if the precedent is that the word shall, in that section of the Constitution, shall be permissive and not mandatory, does it affect all the other subsections where that word is used? Those are outcomes to be dealt with later.
You know, just recall, it just brings to mind that case, the Natasha Poti and the Senate case, where some people say that it's like the judgment was saying, was being more suggestive than emphatic, but that's another conversation for another day. But you know, you've raised constitutional issues, and you know, of course, that there is a call for a new constitution, a growing agitation for a completely new constitution. Now, as a senior advocate and someone who has operated the Constitution both as a legal practitioner and as an executive in government, do we really need a new Constitution, or the problem we have is that of implementation of the current one? Because that's another opinion that's out there.
My answer is that there is never a perfect constitution, and that is why constitutions are amended either by pursuing the amendment process prescribed for it, or they are amended by judicial contestations, where certain provisions are either then modified as a result of judicial interpretation. And all of these are a call to a better life, ultimately. So I respect many members of the Patriots, but the question I have asked myself is that, is this what Chief Rotimi Williams would have done? Is this what Ben Nwabeze would have done if they were alive? And I asked that question in this context. I think I've heard one of the reasons adduced for wanting to have a new constitution was that, well, it was not made by the Nigerian people and it was made by the military administration. That is a lie. I say that with great respect. It's a lie. And all you need to do is to go and read the report of Justice Nikitobi, who was chairman of the Constitution Debate Coordinating Committee, who was asked to review coordinate the debate for the 1995 Constitution, which was then the operative, the Constitution in contemplation. And they issued a call for memoranda. And memoranda were submitted within Nigeria and abroad. Forums, debates were held in the United States of America. Reports were sent to them. There were zonal consultations, as we have them when Constitution is being amended now. And their report showed that the overwhelming request of Nigerians was that they wanted the 1979 Constitution back with some amendments. That is what was reenacted in the 1999 Constitution. And I'm not the first person to say this. I think it was Simon Kolawole of this day who had written and published parts of this. So if the reason for wanting change is based on a false premise that the Constitution was not something from Nigerian people, it was by the military or whatever, then it's on a false premise. The second argument that I hear is that, well, there's too much power in the hands of the second argument is that we're a unitary state and so they want a federal constitution. Again, I disagree with great respect. And I've addressed this in my book, The National Public Discourse. Nigeria, under this constitution, is not a unitary state. And I remain willing and ready to debate this matter. If it sounds like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it must be and it is a duck. And I say this for the following reasons. We have multi-level governments in that constitution, local, state, and federal. We have executive at the state and local and federal level. We have a judiciary at the state, local, and federal level. Customary courts and local courts. So the only thing perhaps we don't have is a constitutionally separated law enforcement capacity. Constitutionally separated. And I tested that for emphasis. Because the truth is that in my own state, for example, as in some other states, we have KAI, which is an environmental sanitation police. We have LASMA, which is traffic police. So perhaps the debate about changing the constitution will be, look, listen, how do we create a constitutional framework for states to have their own law enforcement capacity? Because they have judiciary, they have legislative authority, they have executive authority. So why should it not have law enforcement authority? That doesn't make us unitary, not in the least. If most of the parts are federal, then the quest for a more federal union doesn't make us unitary. So I think those are the kind of specific debates I would like to see, not a generalized one that it is unitary. The last point I think that has been made about the need for this constitution is that there's too much power in the hands of the federal. Yes, that may be right. That is probably so. But the question to ask is, what have we done as a people at other levels of government with the powers that have been taken away from the federal? How have we managed that power at subnational level? In 1999, I recall that the federal government assumed that it had power over planning and urban development in the state. So if you wanted to build a house from any part of Nigeria, you needed to come to Abuja to get a permit. The Tinubu government challenged that and won by a 4-3 decision in the Supreme Court. So that's one power taken away. In my time, we challenged lotteries, we challenged, what was the other one? Tourism, successfully, which were matters that were reflected somewhat, or the federal government felt it had control of. And we won. So those are other matters that have been taken away by judicial action from the federal executive. In the amendments and alterations that have taken place in the last few years, unlike when I was governor, electricity has now been fully decentralized to the states. Rail has been fully decentralized. States can now have their rail. We didn't have it, so we had to take permission from President Yar'Adua to start the Blue Line at the time. And I think what has been, prisons have been taken away. So how many states have built new prisons? And we're talking of prison congestion. How many states have built intra-city rails where we have urban mass transit challenges? And how many states have solved the electricity problem now that every state can operate? So it's not necessarily the case, therefore, that it is just because of this or because of that the country is not working. So I would like a constitutional amendment that says, look, I don't like section this and that, and this is my reason. This is my proposed amendment, and this is what it will mean. Then we can have a real debate. But if it's just to reenact a constitution that says we the people, then you say the executive has this, the legislature has this, the judiciary has this. These were some of the things that Justice Nikitobi complained about then, that the frequency with which we amend our constitution is not consistent with global best practice and behavior. And at the end of the day, as I said in one speech that I gave, I think what the people want is a better life, not a better document, even though a better document is desirable.
Interesting. So do you think that the issue of restructuring is already being taken care of with these issues that you raised?
From all of the things I said, some of the powers that the federal government had are now being ceded to the state, either by deliberate amendments by parliament or as a result of judicial action. And there's a book, I think it's the story or the history of the United States Supreme Court. It was written by a chap called Peter Irons. And you will see how there's a parallel here in how the United States Supreme Court helped in the making of the United States Constitution by judicial interpretations and judgments. So some of the restructuring is happening, but there might be other compelling ones. For example, I would like to see an amendment in the Constitution that deals with citizenship. If women have equal rights, and I argue that they do, if women have equal rights, why should a foreign woman who marries a Nigerian be entitled to Nigerian citizenship, and a foreigner male who marries a Nigerian woman can't have the same citizenship? That's something I would like to see as a specific item. And there are others that I can't readily think of. So let's have the debate about specificity instead of just creating an unreal process to say, just throw away this document. It's like a surgeon telling you that, okay, you are not feeling well, but I'm going to take out all your organs and just replace all of them. And you will wonder, is it all my organs, or is it my brain or my heart or my liver that is the problem?
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. There is one other issue that's been on the hearts of Nigerians, and that is the economy. And I'm sure it's something you've heard about as well. First of all, we'll talk generally, and then we'll probably go into some specifics, drawing from your experience as well in government at the federal level. The economy today, some people say, feels like a paradox, you know. Reforms on paper, but real pain in people's lives. It would seem then that on the one hand, the federal government is doing something for the people, but the people are feeling something entirely different. Is it a challenge of poor management or poor communication? Or is there anything really happening that the people should be feeling, but they're not feeling yet?
You know, when you talk about poor communication, I've served at different levels of government, and no level of government that I served in ever got a pass mark for proper communication. So it's a problem everywhere. No government has ever been criticized or commended for over communicating. We're all guilty always of under communicating. And that is because really the problems that those in government have to deal with is a lot. I put it this way: when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you see are problems. And while you are grappling with which one you can easily solve, you will see more problems during the day. And by the time you are going to bed at night, you will still see problems. If you are unfortunate enough and you dream, you will dream problems. So while you are dealing with all of that, communication becomes quite challenging. And that said, let us also understand that the infrastructure and the concept of communication has changed radically. So everybody is now his own broadcaster, everybody is now his own editor, everybody is connected, nobody is in control, so I can make my own broadcast. And it is therefore different from the days when all of us took information only from NTA or only from FRCN. There are hundreds of broadcast stations now at the onset of privatization. There is also now social media. So on what platform? So if I'm talking to you, if those who are not watching your TV station, I'm not talking to them. It's just that simple. And there are many TV stations they can watch now. So that is a problem for those in government and for those out of government to also understand that you just need to be everywhere. Some people don't watch television again. So you need to go and speak to them on social media. And in speaking to them, you have to find the balance not to leave those who are still television people behind so that you get the aggregate. Now, that's what was the other point you made?
No, the other part of it is whether it is poor management or not, or whether maybe there are real change happening
the
in
government
people's...
is doing a lot. And the
Yes.
other point to make is that there is always a distance between government policy, government programs and projects arising from those policies and results. There's always time. There's a lead time. So it's not a switch that you flip, and it's not fast food. So you were talking about for example, earlier on, Mr. Oyedele talking about tax reforms and that things are going to get cheaper apparently next year when the law kicks in. Now, One of the things I've followed, I'm waiting to see a clean copy of all the bills because what I saw were the draft, and I know that some things have changed. But one thing that didn't change was the tax relief to those at the base of the income pyramid. And if you use the minimum wage now, you will see that averagely about 14, 15,000, if my math is correct, is going to accrue to everybody within the minimum wage. So each income earner and perhaps each household will get that extra money. That is more money for food, more money for fuel, for your bills, and whatever else. So that is essentially like government giving you extra money. So if you do the math, in I think the data we had then was 45 million households. So if you just do the math of 1 million households, you're looking at probably like 15 billion naira if my math is correct. And if you are looking at 10 million households, you're looking at about 150 billion naira every month in the formal economy where you are recording people. Additional spending money that comes to the market. That is going to drive trade. It is going to drive demand and supply of so many things. And the money will trickle down to the poorest of the poorest who support and provide services. That is one thing that is underway. There are many other things that we will not see the results until they fructify, if you like. But there's a distance between policy, the programs and the projects, and then the results.
Well, maybe the government has to find a way to communicate a lot more than it does, because you know very well, and it's something that you've done quite well over time. Communication builds trust, and without it, people are going to just fill in the blanks. But talking about...
I'm sure those in government are listening to you, so
okay.
they will take on your advice.
Now, talking about, communication, help us speak to this. Earlier, we showed a bridge on air along the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. I'm sure it must have disturbed you as well when you saw that bridge while the road itself, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, was being constructed. It started from nowhere, and then from nowhere, just over the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. So one wonders, first of all, what are your thoughts? What is the story, if you can give us an idea of what the story behind this bridge is? Because unless something is done as quickly as possible, this bridge could collapse and it'll shut down the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway.
Now, I think I recall this image back then. But the story is this. The Lagos-Ibadan Expressway was designed as a 2-lane, 3-lane dual carriageway. And 2-lane dual carriageway, yes. And at the time, when Alhaji Okunu, the then Federal Commissioner for Works, was presenting the memo to council for the construction of the road, they decided to leave a land bank in the middle for future expansion. It is that land bank that has formed the basis of the expansion that you now see in the reconstruction of that road to 3 lanes. But the character of the neighborhood, the entire stretch, has changed from what it was in 1981, I think, when the road was opened. Schools, places of worship, more factories have opened up, vehicular traffic density has increased, and that is what that bridge seeks to address. Because what we focused on, because of the limitation of resources in my time, was let us restore first the main carriageway that people are used to so that they can get on with their lives. There are service lanes that were part of the design that have not been built. And that bridge was to descend to an interchange that would take you in and out of those service lanes, like what you have on the 3rd Mainland Bridge, where you climb and descend and all of that, those interchanges. Now, we couldn't complete this bridge, this link to the interchange, because there were land issues where the ramp should descend, and that is a state matter. And I recall then that there were images of myself and Governor Dapo Abiodun going to one of these bridges, because that's not the only one. There were a couple asking him to please help to resolve the land acquisition problem, because without it, the work would not be finished. Now, what happened in this case was an overloaded truck, again, in a clear breach of law and order on the highway, who had cargo on on his rear in excess of the approved headroom. All over the world, there are minimum standards of headroom, and I think the minimum is about 4.8 meters, and it goes on up to 5.2 meters. So trucks are designed to also ensure that they do not exceed this headroom, except people choose to act clearly unlawfully, and that was what happened in this instance. I think it was carrying, it was a truck or a flatbed that was carrying a caterpillar or some strange thing like that. And when he got there, he couldn't pass. Instead of going to do the right thing, offload the cargo and then get the right vehicle and the machine to go underneath, he just forced his way through. And that was what happened here.
Okay, well.
And I recall then that we sent our head of bridges to inspect the damage. But because the work wasn't finished, we just took the view that since it is not yet in use, when the reconstruction starts, all of any structural damage or whatever will be remedied along with the actual completion of the work. But that's as far as I recollect that things were. And we escalated that because the vehicle, I think, was then arrested. So I escalated this, I think, in a letter to the head of the FRSC to initiate prosecution against the driver and the owner of that vehicle. I can't remember in my memory, but I know I have documentation about those correspondence. Because it was clearly an unlawful act.
Absolutely. But what do you think would happen now? Because clearly this bridge has been compromised. The integrity of its integrity has been compromised. And God forbid that anything happens in any time, it will definitely shut down the road. And you know how long it took us to get here thanks to your efforts. So what do you think should be done now?
Well, there's clearly physical damage. In terms of the extent of structural integrity and ultimate danger, well, the eyes suggest something, but this is very specialized capacity in the engineering field. And I think that the officers of the Federal Ministry of Works, the controller of Ogun, Lagos, or your state, depending on whose jurisdiction this bridge falls in, will be either listening or will get information of the need to act to prevent any further damage or threat to life.
Thank you, sir. I had so many other questions on the economy, but we're running out of time, and I'm having some feedback from some people watching us right now. John wrote in, he says, despite the provisions in the 1999 Constitution that tend to portray Nigeria as a federal system of government, the country is not a true federal system of government. Two major aspects of federalism, such as resource control and law enforcement, are still concentrated in the center. With due respect to the learned silk on your program, the centrality of these elements, these key elements, makes Nigeria a quasi-federal system of government. And he says, God bless Nigeria, sir.
So I agree that there is no perfect federation. I said that much in my opening, and that the quest is for a more federal constitution. I didn't disagree with that, but to then say it's unitary is not the reason. Wanting to be more masculine is different from saying I am feminine.
All right, well, Festus Akinboyewa is speaking in a similar light, but here's his comment. What we need in Nigeria urgently are researchers, developers, and entrepreneurs in every sector and every ward, and not a new constitution. Do you agree with him?
Again, look, there is a part of the new constitution that an amendment to a constitution I would like to see. One of them is the one I've addressed. In fact, whilst I was undertaking some research on local governments not too far back, I discovered that the fifth alteration of the 1999 Constitution had actually corrected the earlier error in the 1999 Constitution that Nigeria had 774 local governments. We never had 774 local governments. We had, I think, 768 local governments and 6 area councils in Abuja. So that amendment has just been made. And many, including yours truly, have always quoted 774 local governments and are still quoting it. But that's another amendment that has taken place, albeit not costly. So you will see now that because Abuja is not a state, so it doesn't have local government, it has area councils. And that change has now been made. So there's work going on at some part that perhaps we are not even tracking, we're not paying attention to, or perhaps it's not being communicated enough, as you said, hey.
All right. Well, this one is from Tola. It says, I prefer a virtuous democracy rooted in development plans rather than visionary authoritarianism. Political parties are more about different ways of financing the plan and prioritizations. We must move away from messianic thinking politics. That's the opinion of Tola in this note. So, Fashola, even though we've spent quite some time...
Well, we have development plans. We have infrastructure master plans. We reviewed the 2016 or 15 infrastructure master plan that we met. We made a development plan post-recession, the economic recovery and growth plan. Then we left a development plan up to 2025, and I'm sure the administration is already planning another development plan going forward if they haven't already launched it, but I didn't catch that somewhere. So all of these things are going on, and I think it's for us to perhaps look for more information, and as you said, perhaps for also government to share more information with us in the places where we receive information, because if you either go to some portal or whatever, you will find some of these things there.
Well, the questions are just keep pouring in, and I really must close now. Is this a question that has been sent in, and I'm trying to locate it as well here. It's talking about the census, and I don't have that information yet, but I really would love to have it. Someone is saying that that the fact that we don't have a proper census is hindering development and proper planning. We're not able to really plan. There are those who are saying, okay, we are 200 and something million people. Some are saying we're not up to 200 and something million people.
I agree with that person who says that a census is not only necessary, we have left it far too late. From the last administration in which I served, from the one before, it's just too late. And we must do it because it is critical to everything we do. I always relate a census to having a party where you don't know how many guests are coming. How many drink water? How many drink fruit juice? How many drink alcohol? How many are allergic to this menu? That's how to plan. And as long as we are providing services, whether it's electricity, whether it's water, whether it's roads, whether it's hospitals, schools, how many children exist? How many are going to come in the next few hours that we must prepare maternity centers for? And they must go to school in about 5 or 6 years. We must have numbers with which to plan. And as I've said privately, I don't think we're up to 200 million people. I don't think so. I think that, and some people are already saying we are 230 already. Depending on who you speak to, the numbers keep changing. And you can't plan with such volatile and extreme numbers. We may well be over 200, but there is no evidence to convince me that we are that many.
Well, Chigozie wants you to answer that question, and you have, but he also says, I should ask you, what happened about your book about concerning the proper census that you launched in 2015. I'm guessing that he will have to send you an email to get that answer. Thank you so much for that one, for your time this morning. We're going to have to bring you back. I know you don't like to talk to the press anymore, but thank you so much for making the sacrifice. Truly appreciate your time this morning. Mr. Babatunde Fashola is a former two-time governor in Lagos, as well as an 8-year minister at the federal level. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a good week.
And you too, sir. So, well, that's one more to come. And the question we're asking is there a way, is there such a thing as national programming that will program Nigeria to go in a particular direction the next 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 years? That's up when we return. Thank you for joining us again. In recent months, a series of heartbreaking images have surfaced on the internet from Nigeria's public institutions, not as isolated incidents, but as a mirror reflecting the state of the nation. First, it was the video of students writing their exams using phone touch, flashlights on the phone, and some were even using lanterns, the old lanterns. If you're old enough, you know what I'm talking about. Not because it was a creative exercise, because the classroom had no electricity. That story went viral. Then we saw another clip. There are those who say it's very old, there are those who say it's still current. This time from Imo State University, showing students seated in a large lecture hall, each one with an umbrella over their heads, as rainwater poured freely through the roof while they wrote in the class. Now, think about it. In the year 2024, university students had to shield themselves from the rain inside a lecture hall just to receive an education. Those who are old enough will also remember the story of Success. Well, we'll call her Success. That's her name, somewhere in Edo or Delta State, who was chased out of school because she didn't pay school fees. Journalists paid a visit to the school. It was nothing like a school. Pretty much said a shed for sheep, all tattered and torn and all those things. What have become of these institutions? Well, whether or not the state governments have done something about them, I think the jury is out there. But since these scenes capture something larger than infrastructure decay, they reveal a crisis of leadership. So the breakdown doesn't stop at education. There are those who have referenced the fact that late President Buhari died in a foreign hospital as opposed to a Nigerian hospital, raising questions about whether or not that a lot could have been done putting those infrastructure in place. At a time when there is news out there that billions of naira have been spent on the Asarok Clinic, which is supposed to be the president's formal, official healthcare provider. Well, here we are. Other sectors have the same signs. Doctors are leaving, power grids keeps collapsing. Haven't heard that in a while, thankfully. Our roads and rails are either broken, abandoned, or overpriced. Our fuel distribution network sparks deadly explosions, and our students learn in unsafe, inhumane conditions. On and on we go. So the question today is, don't forget, politicians are already gearing up for the next election in 2027. So are we still choosing leaders based on popularity and propaganda? Or are we finally ready to demand visionary leadership, the kind that plays the long game and builds for the next generation? We have here with us Dr. Sam Adeyemi, who is a strategic leadership consultant. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me here.
The story you referenced the last time you were with us on Channels Television is still making its round. And the fact that you gave a speech about it at a public forum saying that, look, we need to do better by our children, especially seeing that children should not, in 2024, be writing under touch. You even said then that it calls for a national emergency, that in some other cultures, the nation would be shut down. So what, and there have some explanations have been given by the authorities in that regard. Do you feel palliated?
No, I don't. Because in my speech, where I referenced especially the video that we discussed on my last visit here, I was pointing out the implications of students learning in such an environment, the implications for our country 20, 30, 40 years down the line. I said what goes into a mind comes out in a life. And in that speech, actually, I referenced the story of Japan and how the Japanese got to learn to take coffee. That in the early 70s, Nestle, you know, the global conglomerate, was trying to sell coffee to the Japanese, but the Japanese were not buying the coffee, right? So they tried advertising, tried marketing. It wasn't working until they contracted this marketing guru and psychologist, Clotaire Raphael. So Clotaire did some research and came back to Nestle and said, you know what? The reason why the Japanese prefer tea to coffee is because the Japanese do not have any emotional connection to coffee. We have to establish that connection first. Then he gave them this advice. They began to sell coffee-flavored candies, sweets, to children in Japan. And they did that for years. And then fast forward 20, 30 years later, they then came with the coffee and the Japanese bought the coffee. To the extent that, you know, at the time he wrote his book, which was almost 20 years ago, Japan was importing 500,000 pounds of coffee every year. Yes, they had not gotten rid of the tea completely, but now the Japanese were open to the coffee. They had to condition them. So I was pointing out the fact that we humans are actually programmable creatures, that we are creatures of habit. And once something has become habit for you, we say it's your second nature. If you introduce anything new, any goal, any strategy that is not in alignment with that programming, the programming overwhelms it. It's the reason why many people's New Year resolutions just never work. In fact, within 2-3 years of the New Year, a lot of those resolutions
2-3 months. You said 2-3 years.
2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
In fact, within 2 to 3 weeks, many of those resolutions have what I call accidents. Now, when you bring a group of people together, group habit is what we call culture. And culture is really powerful. What Nestle did, you know, what they realized was that coffee was not part of Japanese culture. They had to make the drinking of coffee a part of Japanese culture. And to do it, they went down to the children. Because they say by the age of 7, the emotional neural highways in the brain are already established for the average person by the age of 7. So, I said in that speech that having children learn in an atmosphere or environment of mediocrity, you know, is going to create a nostalgia for that mediocrity to the extent that by the time they are adults, even when they become successful, in fact, let's say they're in government, like governors or senators or members of the House of Representatives, and they're now in the elite class, right? They're comfortable. When they see people, right, let's say students, in such environments like you referenced, university students having to hold umbrellas in a hall right under a roof because it was raining. The fact that we can entertain it, we can contain it, right? We can adapt to it. It's scary. It's because that's how we were raised. Our neural pathways, those emotional highways created in the brain, were created in that environment, so we can take it. There are people who cannot take it. I gave the example of power supply, right? That when there hasn't been power supply for a long time and then power comes, we all shout, "Up NEPA." So I said, the people that will bring progress to our country, that will bring the real development that we need, cannot be people that were shouting up NEPA, celebrating NEPA for bringing power after there had not been power for maybe 12 hours or a whole day or more or longer, right? I said it will have to be people that cannot take it. Now, the average Nigerian, right, who has not been out of Nigeria may not even be able to relate with what I'm saying right now. But then there's a gentleman who, drives me, when I'm in the UK, a British gentleman, right? So he was asking me about Nigeria one day, and I was describing, I said, "What have you had?" So he talked about the power supply thing, so I described it to him. And he was finding it difficult to conceptualize it because he said in the last 20 years, he had not seen the light blink, right? So if we follow the example of Nestle, it means that we actually need to pay attention, especially to the children, right? And put them in those environments that will look like the Nigeria that we need in the future. I'm not seeing that programming yet, and it's scary.
But doesn't that also say that we may have been programmed over the years to where we are now? And how do you think that happened?
Well, maybe we need to admit the fact that our being undeveloped, our citizens being ignorant, being put in a state where practically all of us have to fight for survival, maybe it's advantageous to some people. Maybe I guess the average person may not have thought about it, but actually it's possible that it is intentional because people ask. When I say it's possible for Nigeria to develop, we all need to have that discussion. Where do we want Nigeria to go? Do we want Nigeria to become a developed economy? Because I absolutely see no reason why. I don't see any tribal reason. I don't see any religious reason, right? The countries from which the religions came, right, they're developed. So what's our problem? So the religion is not the excuse. It's not the problem, right? So we need to have that discussion and we need to have that agreement. Why are we not having it? Why are we not having that national discussion in the first place? Because it is advantageous to some people for things to remain the way they are. The state of power supply, for example, is it of advantage to anyone that we should not have uninterrupted power supply? Or maybe if I was selling power generating sets and now inverters and solar panels, maybe it will not be part of my prayer point that we should have uninterrupted power supply for 24 hours. We need to look at it from that angle. And when it is so, then you realize some people that have leadership capacity to influence, capacity to shape the country, are not doing it the right way. We're not having visionary leaders that have empathy for the average citizen and actually want Nigeria to become a developed economy. We need those kind of leaders now. And Nigerians need to listen, Like you said earlier on, so we're approaching another election cycle now. What should we listen for? What should we look out for? What kind of leaders do we need? I say humorously to my friends sometimes, there's this Yoruba proverb that says, the wife that we use dancing skills to marry Eventually, somebody with better dancing skills will distract her and take her away one day. So it looks like it's the people that can make the loudest noise that we listen to, right? When the elections come, and then we begin to see all those images on TV, all those songs, the campaigns, we enjoy the singing and all that. It looks like we get carried away with all of that, and we don't really pay attention to the real issues. Nigeria needs to become a developed economy.
But that is part of the objective, should I say, the vision of this current president, where he says that, look, it is possible for us to become a $1 trillion economy, you know, as a nation in Nigeria. But what, in your opinion, what do you see as the stumbling blocks to that agenda?
The programming of the average Nigerian. The culture will overwhelm our current mindsets, you know, will overwhelm those strategies. The famous management guru, Peter Drucker, is reputed to have said that culture will eat your strategy for breakfast. I look from a leadership perspective because that's my bias, right? And leadership is not about one person saying, I'm going to do this for the country. It's about influencing everyone to do it, right? So until we sell it as a vision, and the average Nigerian has bought it, right? Let's think about it. It's Nigerians actually that are going to build that economy. It's the productivity of the average Nigerian that is going to push our GDP up. You can't build that kind of an economy on citizens that are not educated, first. We can't do it without tweaking our value system, our values. We don't have a culture of excellence yet. Some of those things, those images that we're seeing, the poor quality, they're not about money. They're just about priorities. The fact that we can live in an environment that is not clean, that is not organized, that is not orderly, those are real big issues. Because what we are wasting are the most powerful resources in this world. Time is one of the most powerful resources in this world. So when there's no power supply, and let's say the vulcanizer or the electrician or the craftsperson that needs power supply, right, at least at an affordable level to be productive, when they can't work for 6 hours, 8 hours in the course of a day, that's a huge loss for the country. And that's not one person now. You multiply that by thousands of people. When we have potholes on the road, and a journey that should have taken you 1 hour is now taking you 4 hours or 5. Just take the number of people that traveled through that road that day and multiply them by the 3 hours. That's huge. And yet we're not going to, so as long as we can endure it, so the average person actually goes through that road every day and can endure it, there's a big problem. Okay. So when we shift the value system, right, shift what is important, shift the standards, that's when it will be possible to accomplish those values.
But you're going to still, expound a little more on that question, and here is why. The late former President Buhari said, I think it was in 2018, that it is possible for us as a nation to bring 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. And it was about 2022 that we heard that more than 100 million Nigerians are living in multi-dimensional poverty. Meanwhile, earlier, the president had said we can pull up 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. We asked the media spokesperson to the president, about a year or more after, and we were struggling with 20 or 30 million. And according to him, there was no data still. So if we were not able to achieve that, because there is no evidence that that has been achieved, what do you think were responsible for us not achieving that? And how do you think that will also affect this objective of President Tinubu? of raising Nigeria's to a $1 trillion economy?
Thank you. So, a professor at Harvard, Dr. Edward Banfield, stumbled on a principle many years ago. It is called the law of time perspective. It says the longer the time that you take into consideration in making your decisions and taking action, the higher you rise. Which means the person that plans for 10 years will always succeed better than the person who is planning for 10 months. That's part of where the issue begins for me. Because with our election cycles going for only 4 years, then you find out that each administration comes and then they're planning for what they can do within the 4 years, or at the maximum 8 years, if they're ambitious. That's too short a time. That's too short a time to develop an economy, let me say. I read the book, My Vision, by the ruler of Dubai in the UAE. And he wrote about how his father would take him when he was a young man, when he was a teenager, took him, to this bare land. The UAE is a desert, right? It's in the desert. And the old man took him to this bare land near the sea and was painting a picture for him, how he saw in the future they would build a deep sea port and that it will be one of the largest in the world and all of that. And the man said he knew that would not be accomplished in his lifetime, but he was just preparing him because it was important. It was a very important project. A lot of people did not understand what the old man was talking about and so on, but he sold the young man a vision and they built it, right? I saw Dubai's model. They have a model city that they built, that they designed. Dubai's model city on Mars, planet Mars, in 100 years' time. So that's what I'm talking about. The average country that you've seen develop and that is developing very fast, you will hear about 50-year plans, you will hear about 70-year plans, you will likely hear about 100-year plans. The kind of visionary leaders that we need right now are not people that are going to be talking about 4 years. We need those long-range plans. So we're dealing with principles here now. I read something in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it was a quote from a movie. And that line said, we cannot break the law. We can only break ourselves against the law. Principles make both success and failure predictable. If I throw my phone up 10,000 times, I don't need a prophet. It is predictable. And it is a principle because of the law of gravity. That phone will come down 10,000 times. If I tell Nigerians that the likelihood is that things will be the same or likely even worse, if they think we're suffering now, that this suffering may be worse in 20 years' time, everybody will sound like a prophet of doom. But let's backtrack. If somebody said that 20 years ago, will the person not sound like a prophet of doom? So we're up against principles now. Not only should each administration come and give us its own vision, I think we need something that Nigerians can own. What makes a vision powerful is that once it is programmed inside you, it becomes the filter through which you see everything. One of the major advantages I see to it is the issue of accountability in leadership. How do we measure the success of our leaders or the success of any administration? We just say they are trying, they are trying. Somebody sinks a borehole and puts it there. If they do the things they are supposed to do, and we're busy celebrating and cheering, that's what I'm talking about. That's mediocrity, right? So this vision thing, long-term vision, especially for development, right? It will be the basis for evaluation for us, and it will be the basis for accountability. We need, and this accountability thing is not yet part of our culture, leadership culture. If I draw on Yoruba culture, one of the names that we used to describe our kings is Kabiesi or Kabiosi, which is you are not accountable to anybody. Nobody should query you for anything. We don't realize it, But if you were raised in that culture, it's already programmed into, it was programmed into you before you were 7, right? Before you were through 7. You don't query an elder. There was a day, my dad used to play lawn tennis when I was young, when I was very young. So anytime he got on his motorbike, and he would be in this white shirt and white short, smart, with his racket. Then I would say, I want to go with you. He would say, wait for me, I'll come back and pick you. He never did. So this particular day, when he told me that, I said, you are lying. I said it in Yoruba language. I just saw my mom's hand swinging in my direction. She was going to whack my face. I dodged her. She said, they don't say that an elder, I told a lie. They don't say that an elder lied. That's anking. That's anking, right? So what are we going to do now? So I'm just saying the way we were socialized, that accountability thing is not there. I'm not only talking about citizens now, I'm also talking about leadership. By the time you also become a leader, it will be strange to you for people to ask you, what are you doing with our money? Where you said you were going, your campaign promise, have you kept it? That, you know, for us to have, we say there is freedom of speech, freedom of association, but if some people gather together and they say they want to do protest, we feel, why? Are they crazy? What are they trying to do? And we're alarmed. But we have to be able to hold leaders accountable. If you have power that is limitless, that nobody can challenge, Lord Acton said, it makes us corruptible.
But I think it's different from this generation, because you tell a child today, go to your room and say, why? I think this generation, they're going to have it different. So leading me to the question, how then do you see this national programming, if I can use it? How then do you see it happening? How do you propose that it happens? Because the leadership trust is at an all-time low. Anyone who is in government, even if the person was in opposition, was an Aluta fellow, and just suddenly gets into government, the moment you get into government, you have become one of them. I remember, I think it was the CEO of Budget, was engaged by the federal government for some things, and people were up in arms. Don't go and join them, come and stay with us here, and all of those things. And then the gentleman had to resign, and of course, found a way to keep working in government in the interest of the nation. So how do we then begin this process?
I agree with you that the trust level is very low. I empathize for people who get into government now, because I just imagine how frustrating it must be for them to see their reputation torn apart on social media these days, right? I proposed in my book, Shifts, 6 steps to transform your mindset and elevate your leadership, how really to shift people's mindsets, first at an individual level, and then in teams and organizations. And I actually proposed a way to apply the methodology to whole nations. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to us being able to apply these principles to the transformation of nations. And it's just a basic principle that I stumbled on, that whatever you see and hear consistently over time is what will enter your heart. Literally, that's how the programming happens. The platforms that do that programming, or through which the programming happens, let's think about it. That's why the media is powerful. That's why it's powerful that we're here, because we watch TV, we watch the news, we listen to the news every single day in and day out. That's why movies are powerful, for example. Movies are powerful. And I wrote in the book an experience that we had with some friends of our daughter. She came home on break. It was a short break, and she requested to bring her friend along. This was in the US, and her friend came from Croatia. So when the young lady came, we observed that the young lady was speaking fluent English. So my wife asked, where did you learn to speak English? because you did your primary school in Croatia. Did they teach you in English there? She said, no. So how did you learn to speak English? She said, oh, by watching American movies. That got my attention. And then they said they were going shopping. On the way, they said we should please pick one of their friends who was also staying with another family. That one came from Vietnam. When she came into the car, the young lady was speaking not only fluent English, but pure American accent. So my wife asked her the same question. She said, oh, by watching American movies. Now that made a very strong impression on me. The movies are powerful, right? The advertising industry, why does it work? Why do people spend millions and billions on advertising every year? They put the billboard there so you can see it. They roll the adverts on TV, on radio, on social media. Why? Because it works. You see something over and over, you hear something over and over, it's going to get in there. Especially when you say something over and over and then practice something over and over. The people that shape our world, that program people, these are the basic platforms that they use. I proposed once on social media that the president of our country should speak to our citizens every week. And some people came at me and said, do you know how busy a president is? What are you saying? You think the president is jobless? I thought, well, when you look from a leadership perspective, do you know what the president's job is? It's moving 200 million people in one direction. How do you do that, right? And I said, all the media houses are represented there, right, at the seat of government, even if it's just 5 minutes. There's a former president of the US that did it. He used to speak on radio, you know, many years ago as they came out of the Great Depression. And families would gather around the radio, and the president was able to move a whole nation in one direction. And then you have the education. What happens in schools? We go there, you see and hear every day, you probably right, and then they test you at the end of every time or semester to check whether you were listening in class. But at the end of the day, you come out and they give you a certificate. I am strongly recommending that we use all those platforms. I must add religion. I must add the platform of religion because I also play in that space. And because we're religious people, we're very religious, and we hold our religious leaders in awe. When we listen, when we listen to them, we don't listen the way we listen to leaders in government. We listen to them as representatives of God. So whatever they say, we absorb. And right now, I'm just asking all the leaders in the religious space, what exactly are we saying? Is it in alignment? And that's where the big issue is. If we've not yet agreed on that vision of development, however far it's going to be, 50 years or 100 years, if we've not agreed, all these platforms will not be able to project these messages. So the religious one is also powerful. So I'm saying it's not only government, right? All of us as citizens need to begin to push this idea that our country, this suffering is too much. The data is scary. All of us can feel it. Like I said, I lead in church, right? And I know how, over the last few years, the demands, the requests from church members for food, you know, to meet basic needs, to pay children's school fees, rent, it's exploded. It's multiplied many times over. This suffering is much. And I want to say to all of us, where we are now is not good. Where we're going, if we don't change the trajectory, it's going to be even worse. So we all need to push for that discussion. All of us need to discuss. It doesn't matter. Hunger does not have any religion and it has no tribe. This suffering, somebody sang this song in Yoruba many years ago. Suffering is not stew. God, don't give me suffering, right? Have we not suffered enough? It's time. We need a shift in a different direction. And I want to challenge all of us that operate in those spaces. I don't need government permission to teach or to preach in church, right? And then I have all these followers on social media. Our entertainers, people in the entertainment space, should just do a little bit more than entertain us. They should also influence us. They should lead us, right? So those in the media space, we need to leverage, and I was listening to Mr. Fashola earlier on talking about the major changes that have happened in the media space. That phone that each person holds now, now your TV station, that's your radio station now. Not only for receiving, you can also broadcast. Can all of us actually push for us to have this national conversation and probably even go a step further and begin to paint those pictures of what Nigeria will look like when it is developed? It is when citizens demand for it. That's when the people in government will have to supply it.
But, you know, those people in government that you see, they are angling for the next election in 2 years. This whole leadership shift, mind shift, from what we can see, is not part of their agenda right now. Over the past 26 years of this republic, it's been quite a significant number of people who started in 1999 that are still, you know, making the rounds here, who were governors and now senators, now president, vice president, and the rest of them over the past 26 years. And it will seem like it's almost like the same of the same. So if in the process of engaging Nigerians, what are the things that should be insisted on? Needless to say, politicians, as they say, politicians will be politicians, and they will do what politicians do all the time. So what in the engagement process, because I know that, you know, some of these people are also very tech savvy. I mean, the former presidential candidate of the PDP and, you know, presidential candidate of the Labour Party in the last election, both of them are very active on X and a number of other social platforms like that. So in the engagement process of all these aspirations, including that of the president and whoever else, what should the agenda be? What should the demand be that people will be making from them?
Thank you very much. I think this is a very important subject here. What demand should people make? Because if we will apply the basic principles that work in the market, you can't insist on selling what you like to eat. You will eat it alone. You find out what the people want to eat and you sell it. That's where the big challenge is. It's a demand and supply thing. So there are good-hearted people who have gone into government. But what would you do if you know that you go out there on the campaign trail and you're talking, it's vision, vision, vision you're talking about, you don't share rice, you don't share, you know, you don't address people's basic survival needs. You will lose the election. Then what have you achieved? So at the end of the day, they realize they have to pander to the needs, to the demands, right, or the wants of the market. So that's why this demand side is so important, that we speak to Nigerians. Very soon, the people in politics are going to come out with their messages. And I should warn Nigerians ahead. This next cycle is going to be extraordinary when it comes to the messaging. Messages we're going to hear, because artificial intelligence is here. AI is here. The messages are going to come at us sophisticated, right, from all angles, right? So we Nigerians need to be clear. Like you said, it's been 26 years now in this political dispensation, this democratic dispensation. And it's the same. It's amazing how we raise our hopes up. The hopes just go up as we approach the elections. And then after the elections, the hopes come down. And then the next elections, hello. Somebody said, for us to do things the way we have always done them and to expect different results is one of the definitions of insanity. We should not be collectively crazy, right? Something needs to change. I think I've shared here before how a former governor said he he heard what members of his own cabinet were discussing somewhere, because one of them came and told him, and how they remarked, Governor, come, I saw vision, vision, vision. The governor will just be talking about vision, vision. Is it vision we want to eat? So this ex-governor was saying to me, just imagine, those are members of my own cabinet. We're not talking about the citizens now, members of the cabinet. It is survival. It is what to eat that is of priority to them more than the vision. So we, the people, now need to talk sense to ourselves. Now, honestly, we need to wake up. As Nigerians, we need to wake up and realize, again, I said I read the book, My Vision by the Ruler of Dubai, and I remember the opening lines from chapter 1. Every day in the jungles of Africa, a lion wakes up knowing that if it does not outrun an antelope, it will go to bed hungry. And the antelope wakes up knowing that if it does not outrun the lion, it will not see the end of that day. And he used that to illustrate the fact that nations compete for resources, like businesses. So Nigeria is not existing in a vacuum, right? Nations are competing for resources right now. Things are going to get worse if we don't sit up now and actually decide Nigeria must become a developed. Those beautiful countries that you see on the internet, Nigeria can become like that.
But Kingsley is saying here, the programming with Nestle Japan analogy will not survive here in Nigeria, with reference to electricity, where the political will is not there. In a country that there is no paradigm, there is no pragmatic rule of law. If Villa can integrate imported solar systems, it says a lot. I was afraid to ask you this question, but Kingsley has taken it away from me. Right. How will this programming thing work in the various sectors? We spoke about education earlier. We spoke about health. And here, Kingsley is talking about the power sector, the energy sector. Well, do you think that analogy, should we use another formula?
Honestly, Kingsley, what we're discussing here is principle. It works. It's like saying, oh, gravity worked in Japan. There's no rule of law in Nigeria. Gravity cannot work in Nigeria. No. These are basic principles. It's like when I read many years ago, because these are principles I applied in my life before I now went to put them in a book and backed them with a lot of stories. I've used them to run organizations, used them to move from being a jobless, graduate in Nigeria to becoming a global figure with millions of people following on social media. They are principles. Principles have no respect for persons, right? I illustrate sometimes. If you push a billionaire and then a poor farmer from the roof of a 5-story building, the two of them will come down. So, yeah, it's like, does advertising work in Nigeria? It does.
Just one thing that I have also, okay, so there's this message also from Tola, also from X. He's saying, I think our leaders need to use hourly wages to see what waste we create when things don't work. Multiply that by the man hours to help us with prioritizations. IMO governance is two things. In my opinion, governance is two things: resource management and prioritization. You referenced this earlier, but to a good number of people, perhaps even the challenge is whether or not the leader is qualified to lead. Some people find themselves in governance, and you once said that being in government does not make you a leader. And so I'm not sure the number of people understand that. So how do we make that transition? Everybody wants to see you. Years ago, some 10, 20 years ago, you came up with those images of what an Oshodi would look like. And when in the days of Fashola, Oshodi cleared up, no one believed that was Oshodi. And so the first thing that crossed my mind, hey, wait a minute. Did someone show Mr. Fashola Samadeyemi's, what's that, globe that they used, to see things, crystal ball of Samadeyemi to create this Oshodi? So take us, help us, because it's always about programming, whichever way we look at it. So how do we make progress?
Thank you. I'm hearing something from the comments. Our learned state of helplessness and powerlessness. I'm hearing it. It's actually part of our culture. We can't help it. We're at the mercy of our leaders. We're powerless. So I've been on a huge campaign. I run this live program on the internet every week, almost every Monday, where I tell people the definition of leadership has changed. That belief that only few people are born to lead, everybody else is born to follow, those theories died a long time ago, because the definition of leadership has shifted. It's not occupying a position. It is the ability to influence one or more people to achieve goals. Therefore, all of us can lead. All of us have the potential to influence. It's just that when you have that mindset, that it is the people that occupy those high positions in government and maybe the business world, those are our leaders. The rest of us are not leaders. What happens is you abandon your responsibility to develop your influence and to deploy, to use the influence. Let me ask a question. Let me say again, I've said it in public, and I'll ask that question again that Pastor E. Adeboye asked me many years ago. That rare, once-in-a-lifetime occasion that we had to sit next to each other on a flight. And I used the opportunity. And it was Nigeria I was asking him about, right? Because that's what I'm passionate about. He said, if you have a group of armed robbers and they had the opportunity to elect a leader, will they elect a policeman? I was stunned, right? I wrote it down. And I would eventually meet that same concept during my doctoral program in strategic leadership. That when a group has the opportunity to elect a leader, it will elect the person that approximates the ideal model of that group, of that leader. Forget the people in office, in leadership, at the top, in government. They will never be better than the quality of the majority of us as citizens. Sad to say, I'm sorry, right? I'm saying now, so as we're discussing this, I know our minds are going to the people in government, and I'm saying the people in government themselves are powerless. They find out when they want to shift things, even us, the citizens, because we don't, that development, like the Japan story, the flavor for development is not, it's not part of our programming. The average Nigerian that is 21 years old or younger probably doesn't know what a post office looks like, not to talk of how it runs. That's what I'm talking about. So when you say development, how does the person even conceptualize one? Here, we will really need to depend on our people in the diaspora, our people who are living in developed economies. We need them to speak up. We need them to tell a lot of stories. We need them to describe the process for getting a driving license in London. Describe the process for getting the driving license in Amsterdam. Let's get it here, because what we are used to here, one of our staff, right, one of my assistants tells me he applied for a driving license 2 years ago. He got a slip that was to last for 3 months. At the end of the 3 months, his license was not ready, so they told him to renew it. He's been renewing every 3 months now for the past 2 years, and the license is supposed to last for 5 years. Now, we can take it because we've not seen how it works elsewhere, what's supposed to be normal elsewhere. So this storytelling, this programming, I'm appealing to everyone. Don't leave it to the people in government, but as to whether it's possible or not, with all of us on social media, how powerful social media is right now, that's what I'm saying. What do I see on social media now? Fighting, quarreling, especially this ethnic thing, and then the political one across the parties, bitter communication. I say, oh my God, this is not going to build any future for our country. Can we leverage those opportunities that we have now? And that's where the leadership comes in. So let's use social media as an example. So some people have 5 followers, some have 50. But we must admit, some people have 1 million, some have 5 million, some have 10 million. Can we appeal to ourselves as citizens of this country to stop being slaves in our own country? Stop being powerless. Power is first imagined. We're waiting for somebody to give us the power, for someone to... Actually, power is first imagined. And the amazing thing, when you ask people in government, they will tell you the truth. They may not be afraid. I honestly don't see who the politician in Nigeria, especially the one in government, will be afraid of now, except Nigerians in large numbers. Nigerians in large numbers. That's my appeal.
Okay. I have to ask you this one before we go. 2 things, actually. One, you said earlier that 4 years is too short for any meaningful development to take place. But that is what our constitution says now. And you said also, which is the way it is, maximum 8 years for any executive. But the legislatures, I don't think there is a limit to the legislators for now. So are you suggesting a constitutional amendment to the effect that will extend the number of years the president or governor has to spend in office? Or what exactly are you saying?
Good question. So, no, I'm not suggesting the extension of the time people spend in office. I'm just saying that we should have such a long-term vision that whoever comes into government
Will fall in line with.
Yes, they should just take us further, right? Whatever the party, we expect them to have differences in ideologies. Presently, we don't see the ideologies except their own survival now, but we expect there may be differences in ideologies, but generally, within those 4 years, if you take us some steps further, that'll be fine by us.
Okay. Last one. If you had a room full of Nigeria's emerging leaders and decision makers, what's the one thing you would ask all of them to start doing differently today to secure tomorrow?
If someone asks me, oh, I'm going through a difficult time now, I've experienced failure over and over and over again, what should I do to change my life? The first thing I would say, I want to get them in alignment with principles. You must have a dream. You must have a clear picture in your mind that stays there for a long time of who you want to become in the future. So I'll bring it back down to that vision. And I will advise, especially, if you want to be relevant in Nigeria's future, if you don't want to fizzle out, if you want to be struggling to find a space to operate, it's better actually you help to create that vision now. Because the likelihood, you alluded to something earlier on, the power of technology, the access that the younger generation has, it can be stopped. Power has been democratized. The media has been democratized. That phone that they hold in their hands and access to the internet, trying to stop a group of people like that is like trying to stop the wind. It's just a matter of time with time. So the earlier, therefore, those of us that have influence actually step forward and provide that leadership in the new direction, the better for all of us.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. Dr. Sam Adeyemi, Strategic Leadership Consultant and author. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
By the way, there's this comment from someone who's been watching, Yeshabi, from London. Says, your guest this morning is one of the best motivators I've ever heard. It should be assigned to guide Nigeria's national orientation. Mr. President, please take note. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Now, when we return, we've been talking about mindset, leadership, and all of that, shifting your mindset. You who hated coffee, how you can start taking coffee using the Japan model as Dr. Adeyemi has espoused. This one, next one, is for those who strive to stop striving and start thriving. You'll know the difference when we return. I've been saying that thing like a rhyme earlier. Striving versus thriving, enjoying wholeness. Iwo Akinyoenu is here with us to have a conversation around that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I thought you were only into workout and fitness and all of that.
So so what I do right now is holistic wellness, and that comprises of a transformation of your spirit, your mind, and your body. You know, many times we tend to think that wellness is just about hitting the gym, you know, and just exercising, and that's what it is. But no, it's a 360 dimensional type where it has to do with total transformation, mind, spirit, and body, or you could say spirit, soul, and body. That's how I usually like to put it.
Holistic wellness.
Yes.
Okay. The presence of mind to even consider that holistic wellness, I think, is the #1 problem of people. How do you get to that realization in the first place? Because your realities are too real to ignore. You spend hours in traffic every day. You go hungry, and the prices of food and services, foodstuff, services, and whatever else you have to do, they are too real to ignore. Those things, those factors tend to determine your wholeness, if I can put it that way.
So, you know, I mean, Reverend Sam just left, and the very first time I heard the first law of success was from him, where he said the first law of success says, first within and then without, right? And so whatever we do, however we choose to pursue what we're pursuing, whatever we achieve, everything starts first within us. So if your internal state is in chaos, everything else would be in chaos. It's just a matter of time. So what you need to do, in spite of, I mean, Nigeria itself, it's good enough to want to throw you into that place where there's just something happening back and forth. You are the one who now decides to say, in spite of everything that is happening, it starts inside of me. It starts with the quality of my thoughts. It starts with my values. It starts with, you know, how I see life generally, my perspective. And these things don't happen at once. It happens over time as you grow, as you build, and all of that. And that's how you can then begin to flourish. But, you know, we have the, is it the instant Indomie approach to wanting to get everything fixed here and now. And at every point in time, we begin to get burnout, beginning to get anxious, depression. And that's not to say that the challenges that we face are not real, but it's to say, in spite of the challenges that are coming at you, what's your internal state? That's generally what's going to determine how you respond rather than react, because that's what most people are doing right now.
Does it have to do with, does this initiative or perspective, does it have any gender bias?
No, not at all. It's for everyone, basically. So it doesn't have to do with if you're a man or if you're a woman, but generally, you know, like it's been said, you know, women tend to be more emotional and expressive, but I think that we're all individuals. We have different personalities. We go through different seasons of our lives, you know, per time. So today someone can be quite reserved, and something might happen in their lives that can then turn and change the narrative. So I think it's more about where you are, how aware you are in, you know, your life. Some people are just not aware. So you are in Nigeria, right? And things are happening, but you may not just really be aware of where you are as an individual. And that happens when we're not asking the right questions, when we're not interrogating and having those honest conversations with ourselves. It's very easy for you and I to have a conversation, you know, but it's not very easy for me to sit with myself and begin to ask myself, what is not happening well?
And
what can I do better?
And that needs to happen.
It has to happen. And that happens in the place of stillness, when you're quiet, when you're listening. But a lot of people are not there.
It's not easy.
See, wait,
let me tell you why. Wait, hold on
possible.
first. So there's someone sitting, okay, I just want to be still. And then you know what psychology says about a woman's mind. Everything is connected to everything. I saw a comedy skit yesterday. I'd seen it before. I saw it again yesterday, day before yesterday, where this fellow was saying that, you know, had a man's brain model and a woman's brain model, and it goes to the brain model of the man. It says everything is compartmentalized in a box, you know, like you go to safety boxes and in the banks, right? And that the man, you know, can go there and pick this and return them carefully without one touching the other. But when you go to a woman's mind, everything is connected to everything, you know, so stillness might be difficult. I mean, even in her most intimate moments, she's checking whether or not there's still salt in the house.
So, you know, the fact that she is at that you know, where she is at that point in time does not necessarily mean she cannot learn to be still, because stillness is something that you learn to practice, and then over time it becomes part of you. And the more you do it, the more you see the benefits, the more you want to always just tune in, create those rhythms where, you know, in the morning I sit still, I listen in, I ask questions, I notice how I'm feeling, you know, I decide how I want my day to go. Now, one of the things we must also realize is that we are all energy centers. We carry energy levels. I remember there was a particular day my elder sister said, you know, when she goes to a particular place, there's a lady who emits so much negative energy. And I can tell you that if you check her life, she probably is bitter, angry, stressed, worked up, and she may not even know that she has carried so much of that into her. Now she's dispersing that energy. So if you, as someone who has not decided to ensure that they carry that kind of positive energy, then you allow somebody's negativity to drown you. And then you can take that up and that becomes your reality. Take, for instance, somebody who's working in a toxic environment. Now, you have to continue to work there, but you can decide to put those systems in place to ensure that this toxicity will not get to me. That's your decision. That's what, and that doesn't happen by reacting. It happens by asking questions. What are the things that trigger me here? What are the things that, you know, that I would like to see, you know, differently? Change your perspective. Okay, I may not like the way my boss talks, but I'm grateful that I have a boss and I have jobs. Some people don't have jobs, right? That's already rewiring your brain, because your brain never knows what to think. You feed it what it thinks, and whatever you feed over time, it gives back to you. So if you keep sending negative signals to your brain, you keep, you know, going through that cycle, then over time you begin to just dish out, like garbage in, garbage out. You just dish out negativity, and it's just, you know, in a very high dose and in a very high level. So at the end of the day, we are the ones who would learn to stop, listen, take inventory, ask those questions. What don't you like? What do you want to become? And then, okay, right now, there's a whole lot of chaos in my life. That's the place where you start. It's the place of awareness. You are aware of what is happening. You are taking stock. And another thing not to do is to be judgmental, because your brain will judge you when you give it that, you feed that to it. So you are aware, okay, for example, oh, I can get emotionally worked up when the children are jumping all over the place. But then, okay, how can I rewire this? I'm grateful that I have children. Children will play anyway. This is who they are. I would learn to accept it, and then I will learn to have those conversations that can help me channel the energies and find creative ways to get them to get the things that they're doing. Is that to say that they will not stop shouting, or they will stop shouting? No, they won't stop shouting because they're children. So when you change the narrative on what you're telling your brain, when your brain begins to get that new narrative, then you begin to enjoy the positivity, the positive energy, the calmness, the stillness, and then it turns out into the outputs, all that you do. But many times we wait and we suck it in, and then we begin to react. But that's not how it's supposed to be. It's first within and then without.
Now, I'm still going to stay on that same topic of intra-personal communication, because many people cannot do it. I was still talking to a 25-year-old yesterday, and I was saying, look, I can sense that you are at dissonance with yourself. And there are many people right now watching you and listening to you. They haven't quite aligned with themselves. And it's a difficult decision, the conversation to have. By that I mean, okay, so there is who you are, and then, but you are also afraid to meet the real you. So it kind of, unbalances the scale, so to speak. I go back to that comedy skit. You're going to have to speak to it. The man said that in a man's mind, there is a box that they call the box of nothing. So it's easy for a man to say, I just want to be, I don't want to think about anything. And maybe the wife goes and says, what's on your mind? I said, and the man says nothing. Of course, the woman doesn't believe it. Like, how is it possible to think about nothing? That it's not possible for a woman. So it's it's unimaginable, for a woman to think that a man will just sit down and he's thinking about nothing. So speak to these two, difficult dynamics of aligning yourself, but before which you have to get to the place of thinking about nothing and then arranging stuff in your mind.
Okay, so honestly, even thinking about nothing, that itself, it's a discipline, really, because you have to come to that point where you decide that I'm just going to, keep that open space.
Do you think a woman can do that?
Yes, we can.
Do you do that?
Yes, I do.
Empty space, nothing, the box of nothing.
So for me, what I do is I love to listen to music, or maybe because of my background. So in those times where I want to tune in, for example, I had that moment yesterday. I just put music in, rather put music on, and then I choose to listen to, if there are lyrics, I'm listening to every word. So I'm not thinking anything outside the music. So I'm listening to every word. If it's just instrumental, I'm paying attention to every bit, every chord, everything that the music is playing. I tune my mind to it. So that's how so of course, when you say nothing, it's not like, oh, it's emptiness, right? Because we really cannot, well, there's no vacuum really in life, but you are allowing yourself to tune into what can nourish your mind, your spirit, and your soul. So in that place, that's where you begin to get aha moments, inspiration. That's when you begin to get creative ideas, but a lot of us don't know how to. And, I had the opportunity to facilitate for an organization, and we did like a little exercise. So I told everyone, bring out your phone. So they brought out your phone. Now put on your camera and face it to you. Now look at yourself. And if your soul had one thing that it was going to scream at you, what would it say? So everyone did the exercise, and then later I decided to ask for feedback. And there was a guy who raised his hand and said, I was looking at myself and I couldn't hear anything. Like, it was just noise. And then he said, please, what can I do? And that's where a lot of people are. There is so much noise and we do not even realize. And then he was like, what am I going to do? Then I said to him, the first thing is that you have acknowledged now that when you look at yourself, it's noise. So you now have to go back and begin to ask yourself this question: what is occupying my head, my space? What is screaming at me right now? What's the noise about? And then he actually said, I want to learn how to be still. So I just gave him a few tips, things to do, and he was really grateful, right? So the truth of the matter is, we must, at every point now, you must come back to have dialogues. My other sister, she taught me something. She would say, oh, sometimes, because I was at her home one day, some years ago, and then she told someone, oh, I'm having a meeting. And then I said to her, but there's no meeting. And she says, oh, I have a meeting with myself. I schedule meetings with myself. And I was like, oh, really? She said, yeah. I said, to do what? I mean, to think, to be introspective, to check where I am, against where I'm going. So she has those meetings with herself. So I decided to schedule it. And my children, they got back from school yesterday. I told the first one, please, guys, Mommy is not going to be available for the next 1 hour. for things, right? And they were able to honor it. So many times we assume that people know that we need space. No, when you need to create that time, that sanctuary, that space for yourself to come back, introspect, let the world know this is the time, and do it politely. Don't send out negative energies anywhere, right? Because anything you send out, it will come back to you. So if you're sending out negative energy, it will come back to you. And you are the energy center yourself. The good book says, as you think in your heart, so you are. So if you're constantly focusing on negative thoughts, oh, by the way, many people do not realize, it will be surprising to know that 80 to 90% of health issues are directly linked to our emotional state. I just finished reading a book, Deadly Emotions by Dr. Don Colbert, and it was startling, the research that was made, how the emotional state of people actually kills faster, especially when they go through trauma, when they go through unexpected life twists and turns. A lot of people are not just able to leave that emotional space or baggage, and the body over time will tell. So some people today are suffering health issues probably because of trauma or things that have happened in their past, maybe the death of a loved one, maybe the loss of a job, maybe, some relational, breakdown, and things that were not resolved, and they have carried this kind of resentment for such a long, long time, and they're not even realizing that this is having a negative effect on them. So it's very important.
These emotions things that you just talked about, I think you need to decrypt a number of things about it, particularly unforgiveness and trauma, unforgiveness, trauma, and gratitude. Let me not play only on negative emotions. Yeah. The role of unforgiveness on our general well-being, how it produces bad energy and how it produces lack of productivity in our lives, trauma that people hold on to not because they want to, but because they just have to, and then how gratitude, helps us to generate any kind of energy around us.
So the first thing I'll say is, just take a quick look at your life and, ask yourself, am I really happy where I am, with the state I am, my heart, my mind? You will know where you are. It's not something that it's hard. You just would know that there's something that's missing, or you feel that, oh, I'm healed, or I'm in a healing process and all, right? If you have been betrayed, if you have suffered any hurt or pain, permit me to say that I'm very sorry for what and who offended you. But you see, you actually do have a choice to change the narrative. Now, with trauma and with unforgiveness, when you do not heal from them, what happens is that you bleed on other people who did not cause it. So it's important that if you have not healed from trauma or unforgiveness, if you're a spouse, if you're a mother or a father, if you have other colleagues, things will continue to trigger you that will cause you to bleed on your children, your spouse, your colleagues, people that don't know what happened. So you really need to ask yourself this question: am I still bleeding? Am I still hurting? Is there anything that I have just thrown aside and not dealt with? And the truth of the matter is, the healing process can also be messy. Why? Because you have to go back to that same thing that you do not want to confront, and you have to confront it. So for example, when somebody breaks their legs and they need to get a surgery done, it would be opened up. You will have to go to see the doctor. It's going to be painful. He will need to tear it out because the bones are probably out of shape and it needs to be, fixed. That process is painful. I mean, I had to go through cesarean section 4 times. It was painful. But today, when I see the children, I am always, always grateful. So when you allow yourself to go through that pain, not because you want to hate on the person, but because you really have to heal from within, then you can begin to thrive, spirit, soul, and body.
What if the fellow doesn't even know that they're in that space?
So that's why you have to be introspective. Now, one thing about unforgiveness and trauma is that you will always get triggered when somebody will just make a statement
or
and
do
you
something.
will flare up. That's a sign that there's either trauma there or there's unforgiveness. Whenever you find yourself being triggered, just, oh, she said this, then that's something you need to deal with. So you go back and ask yourself, why was I triggered? When you sit down, you might notice that, oh, when I was a child, my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, somebody said this to me, and I've held on to it. I've not been able to process it and let it go. So these are things that we must ask ourselves this question, because right now, this new generation with mental health breakdown and stuff, they've not really gone through a lot, but I feel like, they have to learn emotional resilience, right? Rather than just running away. When you want to build emotional resilience, you don't run away, you grow through every phase and every stage, and it is a process. So if you sabotage the process of healing, maybe as a single, when you get married, it's going to show up.
Okay. Now, it's not easy to see what is working when many other things are not working.
I agree.
You talked about, being thankful for a job, even though it's a job you don't want. You being thankful for having a boss, even though the boss could be toxic and also one bleeding on you and all of that. Gratitude is difficult when things aren't going our way, right?
Yes, it is. But you see, gratitude, like they say, permit me to just put some rhyme in here. Gratitude takes you to new altitudes, and actually that is very true. Gratitude shifts your perspective, and gratitude opens you up to receive more, in life, right? So when you are always thankful, I literally had an experience yesterday. Something happened, and I was almost going through the route of complaining, and I said, nope, I'm not going to do that. I will be thankful because, number one, I have a family member. Number two, we're talking right now. Number three, it's really not that bad, right? It's just that I have expectations that were not met, and so I was wanting to rub that expectation on someone else, right? So you can always, at every point in time, ask yourself, what is one thing I can be grateful for in this situation? Now let me ask you, jam question. What is one thing you can be grateful for in Nigeria? Right, okay, so if you don't have any, I'll tell you, you're watching me right now and you're learning how to become mindful and whole from within. So that's something to be grateful for, really. So it's not always a grand thing. Always look for anything in every situation where you get triggered. Just ask yourself, what one thing can I truly be grateful for? You wake up every morning, I can breathe. Some people are in the hospital and they have gas and they're paying for oxygen, right? You are not paying for air. Air is free. What one thing can I be grateful for? I have children. They can be running all over the place and driving me crazy, but I'm grateful that I have children because there are people who have stayed 25 years still looking for children. So when you shift that narrative and that perspective, your brain begins to open up to opportunities, open up to blessings, open up to things that you never thought, was possible. Things just begin to open up. You begin to impact and influence everyone around you positively. And I think that's something that, can help. And trust me, it's not going to be breezy and, oh, I just wake up and everything is da-da-da-da-da. There are days that you would be punched. There are days that would be ugly. But remember, just stay grateful, practice awareness, be still, ask yourself, have those conversations with yourself, and you'll be amazed.
I want us to emphasize it, and here is why. Watching us right now, the issues are so real, so strong. Children are going into the university, hundreds of thousands of naira or or thousands of dollars to send the child to university, whether within Nigeria or abroad. electricity is this. I mean, the issues are so real.
Indeed.
I just got back yesterday, and I woke up this morning, all 4 tires deflated. So the issues are real, too real to ignore. And so it's difficult, it should be difficult for anyone, you would imagine, to imagine that the most trivial of these things that you're saying have the capacity to reverse those real realities, if I can put it that way.
Indeed. But you see, at the end of the day, it starts and it stops with you. And that's one reality and one truth we must all accept. I come out in the morning and my 4 tires are deflated. What a day. But I'm grateful that I still have a car. I'm grateful that I can still drive, right? I mean, we must see, because the truth of the matter is there is something that is worse than what you're experiencing. So if we take that narrative from today to say, whatever I'm experiencing, there's someone out there that is experiencing 10 times worse than what my situation is, I think it will help us to shift the narrative to learning to be more, to stay in a place of gratitude, much more than seeing the problems. And remember, whatever you magnify is what will be your outcome and your experience. So if you keep magnifying the negativity of the country, you keep magnifying the negativity of traffic, you keep magnifying everything that is negative, then your whole life and your whole experience will constantly stay in the negative. So while there is a negative, you know, the negative and positive, why not tilt towards the positive so that your outcomes would also be positive as well? It's not easy, truth be told. And I must tell you, I have suffered, you know, I was stuck in an emotional rut for such a long time. And I finally just came to that point where it was like, you know what? This has to stop. This has to change. So if other people can do it, then you certainly can do it, because God has wired you that way, but it would take a bit of training. Imagine you just started to exercise today for the first time. You know, it would take about 30 days to gain strength. So if you're starting this kind of thing, understand that you're going to have the blue days, you're going to have those days that you just wake up, you're not in the mood to say thank you. It's okay, but don't stay in the negative. Always change the narrative.
I'd like you to speak for 30 seconds about environmental wellness. I saw a short video one day of a guy just saying that no matter what somebody is going through, if someone has a bad mood, toxic, whatever, that the person should go and clean his room.
Okay, so yeah, so I've had a practice for over years, thanks to my mom. I realized that every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do is to lay my bed. I can say that, you know, that it's just something it does to your mind. Just having that mindset of choosing to be clean and neat. You know, it's I don't know, I cannot explain, because there was a story of one naval guy who said, oh, always, when you wake up the first thing in the morning, make your bed. There's some psychological, I probably will go and do more research about it, but there's just something that it does to you and your mind. And I think that, you know, it's something that people should learn to do.
As you said, it's a choice to make all the way. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.
You're working here and is a holistic wellness practitioner. We appreciate your time today.
You.
And that's been Sunrise today. Thank you for the privilege of being a part of your Saturday morning. Hope it wasn't too boring. Hope it was informational and transformative for you. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. See you next week.